Greetings to all of you. Today we gather to quiet our hearts and reflect on the Feast of the Ascension. And the theme that we will explore together today is Dare to Step into the New with God. Dear friends, surely in life we heard the saying, change is inevitable many times. It is considered a driving force for development, an unavoidable law. However, have you ever asked yourself why deep down most of us feel a bit uncomfortable, even fearful when facing changes? Why do we tend to hold on to familiar things even when our reason tells us that change might bring better things? The answer perhaps lies not only in habit or conservatism. Scientists have shown that at a deeper level, this resistance psychology originates from the very biological structure of our magnificent brain. Through evolution, the human brain has been programmed in a sophisticated way to prioritize survival by avoiding uncertainties and potential threats. Every time we face a change, no matter how small, the amygdala, the name for the brain's fear processing center, immediately sends out alarm signals, make us feel tense, anxious, and sometimes wanting to give up even before things begin. Ladies and gentlemen, therefore, resistance to change is a natural human reaction. But today, in the joy of celebrating the Feast of the Ascension, we are invited to look at a great change, an event that seems full of paradox. Jesus, after conquering death and rising gloriously, does not stay with the disciples as they had hoped. Instead, he departs and returns to heaven. Try to put yourself in the position of the disciples at that time. They had been intimately connected with the teacher Jesus for 3 whole years. He was their faith, their solid foundation, their guide on very path. Now, as the Lord departs, they must face an immense change, from having the Lord by their side, being instructed by Him in every word, to having to walk alone in a world full of dangers and challenges. We can imagine the complex emotions tearing at their hearts: confusion, fear about the uncertain future, and the emptiness of losing a wise and compassionate teacher, Jesus. But what is the strange thing, ladies and gentlemen? Today's Gospel, according to Luke, we see a remarkably surprising detail. After Jesus' ascension, Luke tells us that the disciples returned to Jerusalem with great joy. The disciples did not mourn at all. They did not fall into a state of confusion or lose their direction. Instead, they were filled with joy, a deep-rooted, steadfast joy, not just a fleeting, momentary emotion. Where does that joy come from? It comes from the unwavering faith that Jesus never abandoned them. His ascension was to open for them a new horizon, a new way of presence. He is seated at the right hand of God the Father, and from there He will continue to be present and act more powerfully in their very lives. Jesus promised them that they would receive power from on high, the Holy Spirit. They believed that although the way Jesus was present has changed, His love and power were not diminished at all. They also understood that their mission would no longer be limited to a small area, but would extend to the ends of the earth. You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, throughout Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. It was through this deep conviction that the disciples were continually praising God in the temple. They were not withdrawn in fear, nor were they complacent, but were filled with gratitude, hope, and ready to embark on a new mission with hearts burning with the flame of faith. So, why there is wonderful change in the hearts of disciples? Dear friends, it is simply because Jesus never abandoned them. He departed to be present with them in a new and more powerful way. In the first reading from the book of the Acts, the Lord promised to send the Holy Spirit who would give the disciples power from on high. And in the second reading from the letter to the Ephesians, St. Paul prayed that we may be enlightened to know the hope to which the Lord calls us and the immeasurable power that He has for those who believe. Ladies and gentlemen, the profound reason why the disciples could rejoice when Jesus ascended was because they firmly believed that the Lord had not abandoned them. Jesus' departure was not a cold separation or tragic severance. On the contrary, it was a transformation in the way of presence. Jesus left the visible world to be present with the disciples and with all humanity in a new, deeper, and more powerful way. Dear friends, in this world full of changes and uncertainties, we never walk alone. We do not have to fight with our own weak strength. The resurrection power of God, the power that raised Jesus from the dead and seated Him at the right hand of the Father, is now working in the lives of those who trust in Him. This is not just a theoretical concept, this is a living reality. When we face changes, challenges, and fears in life, we can be confident because that power is not far away, but is right within our hearts, supporting us every moment. Thus, Jesus' ascension did not make the disciples weaker, but rather opened up for them and for us today a new path, a path of living in great hope, in the living presence of God, and in the power of the Holy Spirit. So, what is today's lesson for us? Is it that change, although sometimes make us feel insecure, is not always a sign of danger. There are changes that are necessary turning points for us to grow, to enter into a richer and more meaningful life. The Feast of the Ascension teaches us to dare to leave the familiar, to believe that the Lord is leading us to a new height, and even when our ordinary eyes cannot yet see clearly, let's dare to walk on new journeys with the Lord. But we will not be alone, because the Holy Spirit will always accompany accompany and strengthen us. Ladies and gentlemen, when facing changes in life, whether it's a job transition, a change in living environment, a loss of a loved one, or simply changing an old habit, instead of letting fear dominate, remember that in God, every change always carries within it a promise. The promise that He will never abandon us. The promise that behind uncertainty there is always a future full of life and hope. And the promise that with His power we can soar higher than we ever dared to dream. May the Holy Spirit, whom Jesus promised to send, come to illuminate our minds and hearts, so that we may no longer fear the changes of life, but embrace them with abundant hope, with steadfast courage, and with complete trust in the infinite power of God's love.